Go to Art Singapore YouTube. It's like
If you watch magic money, and people in the consider you are the as number of friends. What is average? What is below average? Find the positive
everybody. And welcome to the first of the Grow Asia Digital Learning Series. My name is Paul Votia. I'm a director at Grow Asia. Thank you for taking the time to come here today to learn, but also to share ideas through the breakout session later, and to meet others from the sector. It's always exciting for us when we've brought an event together to see people meeting on the side and creating new partnerships. Digital technologies are set to transform smallholder value chains. New technologies will revolutionize how farmers loan money and gather information on their farms. For businesses, digital tools offer a range of benefits, including improved logistics and reducing transaction costs. At the end of today's session, we will be releasing for the first time the Grow Asia Digital Solutions Directory. The Solutions Directory lists a wide range of digital solutions which are already being used in smallholder value chains in ASEAN. We hope that it will be a valuable tool for you, whether you're an agribusiness, a development actor, or an investor, in helping you connect with digital solution providers for smallholder value chains. Preparing the digital directory has been an exciting journey. It's taken us many months to gather all the data that we need. In a lot of ways, it's filled the team at Grow Asia with hope for what's going to happen over the next few years in smallholder value chain. We've talked to over 60 entrepreneurs about their solutions, and we're literally talking to the people who are building the future of this sector and creating new digital technologies which are going to allow the sector to grow. However, preparing the directory has also highlighted the fact that a lot of the digital solutions for smallholders in ASEAN are nascent. They're either in trial or they're businesses searching for a scalable model. In fact, we estimate that only about 2% of smallholder farmers in ASEAN are regular users of some sort of digital technology which is being used in their farming operation. What this means is that we're at the launch stage. We're at the very beginning of the process of building the technologies which are going to shape digital for smallholders in ASEAN. And we think that one of the most exciting, or one of the most important roles Grow Asia can play, given where the sector is learning. We want to help corporates, startups, development actors, investors learn about how these digital technologies can be used. And while we're doing that, we want to build a community of practice that can work together and form partnerships. There will be 6 events this year, and what those events cover, the themes, are up to you. Let us know what you want to learn about. We've had a lot of interest in drone spraying technologies, we've had interest in digital payments, and we've had a number of both startups and corporates come to us and say, we want to learn how to build corporate startup partnerships because they're so important for smallholder technologies. Before I pass over to Adam, I want to thank the Australian Government, as well as the Inclusive Business Action Network for providing the funding that makes this digital learning series possible. Pass over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry, I was just outside, but I think I was supposed to introduce Paul. So Paul obviously did a good job of introducing himself. But certainly on behalf of Padang and Level 3, welcome to all those who haven't been here before. This is a place that we're very excited for a whole bunch of things that goes on here. But most importantly, the way that we've been able to establish in the last 12 months as Level 3, as we see it, as the home for food and agri-tech activities in Singapore. Of course, it's happening all over the place and it's exploding at the moment, but we've been very lucky to have such support of our various corporate partners here, obviously with Unilever, with Cargill, MUFG, Syngenta, just sort of keeps on keeping on, and well, Yara, but you're not actually taking a desk here. I've been trying to send you a desk, so good, sold. So there's a lot of activities happening here, and of course we've been partnering with Grow Asia. Now, what I'm going to do, sort of briefly, let me get out the clock so I can keep time, is give you just a few thoughts, observations of what we see is going in the marketplace. Now, I'll say in advance, everyone's going to have a different opinion about it. each of some of the slides, but at the same time, I mean, that's why we're here. We're going to discuss some of these, and then when we go into the breakout after the panel, we can sort of get into a little bit more detail. So let me get on with the remarks. Okay, let me see where we're at. I think, yes, sorry, just the internet is on. One more time. Okay. Yes, please show me how stupid I am that I can't operate it. Yep. Right, officially I am stupid, is that what the point is? Okay, well, yeah, 10,000 years ago, we got a lot better. We moved. We became agrarian. But sadly, in some ways, over the last 10,000 years, we've actually haven't done that well in some ways. Yes, we've had 1, 2, 3 industrial revolutions, and we're sort of launching into the 4th. But along the way, you know, I think that we've actually done a lot of bad things. We still, or not enough of the good stuff. We still have billions of people undernourished on a daily basis. And I guess I'm sort of making these couple of comments, and they're comments that you all know. But when we start to talk about agri-tech, food and agri-tech, we can very quickly jump into the bright, shiny objects of technology and solutions that we're having. Without trying to take you through a design thinking program, I do think it's important to keep stepping back and just seeing where we are before we launch into the fabulous things that we can do thanks to the 4th industrial revolution. It is giving us the opportunity to solve many of these problems. So if we're thinking about the billions who are undernourished, you know, the hundreds of millions of farmers who are still subsistence living farmers. I mean, the fact that we're wasting 1/3 of food. I mean, there's still all these particular issues going on, and of course, the zinger, in many ways, if those 3 weren't bad enough, is what we're doing to the planet overall. Emissions, you know, anyway, if we attribute 25 to 30% of emissions to the agriculture industry. Now again, some people will argue about those numbers, but it's of that order of magnitude. We know we can't go from 7 billion to 10 billion people doing the same things. So I think that's maybe that's the downer to start with, but the upper is that we've got all this great technology, the opportunities, and the fact that here on a Tuesday afternoon, we've got 80 people sitting here to think, how can we improve these things? I think, again, on the optimism side of things, the great thing about Singapore, that we can, on any day of the week, get people together because they do want to do something better. Come together. You're represented by some of the largest companies in Singapore here in this particular industry, and all prepared to come along and see what we can do better. And for that, we thank you. Now, let's just have a look at some of these numbers, courtesy of our good friend Michael Dean at Ag Thunder. Yeah, the numbers are getting up there. Now, just to make it clear, if you're pulling out your copy of Michael's recent report, which you can download, this number globally is 16.9 billion. This 6.9 refers to the upstream. He divides the report into upstream and downstream. The downstream includes a lot of things like food delivery, etc., which for the purposes of our discussion, as fine as that is, that's not where we're focusing. Numbers are big, and that's great. Growth is getting up there. WEF released a fantastic report last year, which I'm sure many of you have read, Innovation as a Purpose. And if you haven't seen it, I would absolutely recommend it to you as one of the best summaries of what's going on, the potential, some of the issues. It points out that in the last, was it last 10, I forget how many years they tracked it for, but the investment in ag tech was roughly 14 billion compared to health tech at 145 billion. So a factor of 10. We have been the poor cousin in terms of investment. It is changing, and that's good. And these numbers reflect that. But please remember, these are global numbers. Now, moving towards more our part of the world, you can see the numbers are a little different. The 590 million in China is not one, because if you were reading before, you would have seen the largest single one was 450 million. Mevo's raised 590 through a couple of rounds. But for Southeast Asia, these are the numbers that we have been able to confirm. Now, somebody out there is going to say, no, I actually know something about these numbers. These are based on what we've been publicly able to track or calculate. Importantly, numbers are going up, which is going in the right direction. If you're comparing this to the global number I did before, it's around 84 million. So, but that's sort of the money side. Let's now sort of think about who's doing what and who's involved. And again, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but many of you are in the room. You're all very active, and I think this is great. This is a lot of the things that we're seeing great corporates like you doing internally. You are building some great tech, you're getting out there and doing some very interesting things. So that's kind of what some of our friends are doing, and we're going to see a lot more of that. Now, if anyone's in here and you don't end up on one of the slides, I do apologise. Please give me your business card later, and I can assure you on the next edition you will be featured. Oh, these logos got even bigger. You feeling good about that, Brian? We've got a nice one. We're Hing, a nice big MUFG. So, and then this is the other side. Of course, we are about open innovation. And so these partnerships are important to us. We're seeing a lot happening with Cardinals programs. MUFG and Yara here actually working with the ASEAN Digital Program, which we're really excited about. A number of us actually were in West Sumatra last week, working with the cohort and working with farmers in West Sumatra, which was a great experience for all of us. And the Mars one, I actually saw that only launched not so long ago. But there's more. And again, it's not about just seeing lots of things, but I think it is terrific to see the depth and breadth of the activities that are going on. One I just only noticed that the other day was Airbus in New Zealand doing a satellite competition down there for AgTech, which is great. Grow Asia, we were privileged to work with Paul and the team last year to do the first Grow Asia Hackathon 2018. And yes, you've heard it right, 2019 Grow Asia Hackathon is coming to a place near you soon, so watch out for that. Rabobank with the Food Loss Challenge, fantastic to work with them. Isabel at Future Food continues to do an amazing job. Claire, who's here, shout out to you, Claire, at the back there. The Yield Lab launched earlier this year. So we're very excited just to see the momentum of all these players coming into the market, truly fantastic. And of course, bring ourselves back to ourselves and the fact, yes, the hub. We are the hub. It's, thinking about virtual Singapore. We know that we can't do everything here in Singapore, but it's how do we collect ourselves, how do we pull everybody together to, in a sense, create our own golden triangle that, if you follow the Netherlands and the success of the golden triangle, there's a lot happening here. And again, it actually sounds like everybody on the slide is here, but Enterprise Singapore with the announcement of the Seeds Plus, the 90 million. Now, when you think about how much money I had on an earlier slide, around 23 million, we're starting to see these sorts of funds coming into play. We can see that the momentum is very real. It's not just people talking about. And of course, we've got to find the deals. That's the next thing. All you investors are saying, yes, the money's there, but where are the deals? And that's true. We've got to get it right. But these are the folks that have now got the money. So let's keep an eye on them and see what they're doing. So here's just a couple of kind of fun facts, then we'll go into a little bit more about some of the opportunity areas, if you will. But yeah, close enough to half of the agri-tech startups have occurred only in the last 3 years. And again, it's back to the earlier point, things are moving. And here's just a sense, and this is not trying to be a CB Insights one with every possible one and sort of micro sites that you can't, size that you can't read, but this just gives you a sense across a couple of categories. Photo of me? No. Take a photo of the map, if you will, and that obviously just keeps on growing, and with all of these maps, it's very hard to keep up with them. But it's just good that we just keep seeing the expansion. We did a version a little over 12 months ago when Sproutex, the Australian AgTech Accelerator, was visiting, and I can tell you that the number was most probably just about that many. It's changed in such a short time. It's truly fantastic. Okay, so where are these people? What's going on? What are they doing? The questions you're asking. Now, here we go. Again, this is a combination of our research with Traxon and a variety. We've got a database that we're tracking at the moment 175 agri-tech startups in Southeast Asia. And anyone is saying, no, I know that there's 200, please give us the numbers, we'd be happy to update. Importantly though, Indonesia's leading, and Singapore, we're fractionally behind. And of course these numbers are going to change, but it's great to see Singapore having such a lead there. I'm sure many of you sort of travel to Indonesia. I sort of there quite a bit recently. I'm just amazed at the momentum. I know the Salem Group is launching an agri-tech facility later this month. It's mostly focused around food as opposed to agri-tech as such, but there's a lot of stuff happening. So Indonesia really is rocketing along, and certainly Thailand, Malaysia and Vietnam and the Philippines, a little bit lesser, but things are happening. Now, what are those numbers going to look like in 6 months? I actually don't know. I'm not going to pretend to predict, but I'm certainly sure some of them are going up, but at the same time we'll see in another chart that maybe not so many in volume, but perhaps the value of money raised. So, in this period, the last 3 years, 25% have been focusing on e-commerce marketplace. Again, how does that all fit in? Well, some of that, when you look at the companies, it's sort of the easier end of the market. Setting up a trading place, a platform, it's easier for people to possibly do. The technology itself is less complex, and also the adoption rates can be higher. Compared to, say, when we're looking down, I mean, Paul was talking about drones and remote sensing. We're seeing smaller numbers there at the moment. But as we all know in technology, whatever's a small number today, traditionally, is going to be a bigger number tomorrow, because as we look at the plummeting costs of technology, the adoptions of hand phones, etc., the movement from feature phones to smartphones will continue to assist the development and the rise of these numbers. But that's the way it's playing out on our analysis at the moment. Now, this is a bit of 2016 was a peak. Last year, and 17, a drop down in terms of new companies. However, as you saw, the funding was growing, so that's indicating that the dollars per deal is higher. So suppositions, some of these ones, there was a rush early days, people are now being a bit more measured. But I still think that we're going to see, particularly on the back of the investment, the range of those programs that you saw, particularly here in Singapore with the support of the government, we're going to see a lot more coming. Now, sorry, I forgot to look at my timing. Oh, I never picked start. What time is it?
13:21.
Okay, what does that mean? I've got 10 minutes. Oh, thank you. Okay. Right. So I don't always talk to myself as I sort of try to present, but sometimes I do. Oh gosh, there are people watching this. I'm sorry, people think this is streaming. They think I'm crazy. All right. Yes, did everyone know that we're streaming to amazing places around the globe? Or at least the region anyway, so it's going well. Hello, wherever you are. So, we all know, sort of coming back again to perhaps the obvious, it's data that's driving the digital solutions that we're all trying to create. And so, I guess, how are we collecting the data? What are the opportunities to collect the data that then can lead to just some of the kind of precision, some of the new solutions that we can develop? But let's face it, without data, there won't be the solutions. Without data, there can't be AI. So we've got to keep finding ways to collect more data. I mean, if you look at these, some of them are collections, tools, largely. I mean, satellites, imaging, They're collecting the data, feeding it back down. Mobiles, they're collecting data, but they're also part of the program, so they're users of the data. If they're in the hands of farmers, they're part of the solution. Likewise with drones, they can be collecting data, but obviously they can be doing other good things, whether it's spraying or actually sensing and collecting data. They're multi-purpose activities. Also like the IoT sensors, obviously collecting data as they're reacting to a situation, whatever they're sensing, but then taking action and driving something as a response to that. So in a sense, your satellite data in one view of the world can sort of be seen as passive, but we've got lots of data collection. And so, I mean, while we're not flooded in it, there's lots around, but I think we're all increasingly realizing that it is also increasingly about the business models. We'll come back to a little bit on that. Now, just picking up on sort of example of IoT sensors, again here, looking at Singapore, the sensors that these organisations, actually Singapore and Indonesia, the sensors here collecting, monitoring the quality of the fish, the water. There's a whole bunch of good sensing going on. Aquaculture, I'm sure most of you would have seen that in the budget. The government is very keen to support aquaculture. EDB has nominated aquaculture as one of its sort of top 3 areas. So we're going to see a lot more in terms of aquaculture and the way that aquaculture can certainly use a lot of this data to improve the catches. So, good old IoT. Now, I put that when? Now, because we've all been talking about IoT, we've been talking about the masses of sensors, whichever report you review, how many billions of these we're going to have out there. The issue is how will we use them? Built Food Cradle here in Singapore is utilising IoT to sort of run sort of model farms that then can be sort of picked up and copied by farmers. But like all of these things, you know, what's the business model? How is it actually going to work? We know that technology can do certain things, but are farmers willing and able to change their behaviour? Can they afford what's required? Yes, the price of sensors, we keep being told, is dropping. Yes, it is. But just because it's there doesn't mean I'm going to buy it, even if I can afford it. Because A, I don't know how to use it, I'm not convinced. There's still an enormous amount of change requirement before these things are really going to drive. But certainly be interested to hear more about this when we go into the breakouts. Drones. Yeah, I mean, look, was it 50,000 in China? I think I saw an even higher number than that the other day. Enormous numbers. And in China, what are they doing? Largely spraying, which is pretty good. Because, let's face it, we don't want people being exposed to the potential harm, the back-breaking work of spraying. But here in Southeast Asia, is it happening fast? No, it's not happening fast at the moment. Can it be utilised? Absolutely. And again, it's coming back to the right business model. I mean, if I'm a farmer, spraying manually 1 hectare would take me 4 hours. If I'm using a drone, I can do the same space in about 15 minutes. I think I've got those calcs right, Rob, haven't I? Something about that. So that seems a pretty good trade-off, but as we all know, as you all know, working in the industry, it just doesn't work that simply, trying to explain to farmers that this is what they should be doing. Even in Australia, you know, broad acres, people are still trying to work out how to monetize sensing, because everyone's saying, oh, we can use these drones, we can do all these activities, but, you know, where's the money? How am I going to make money out of this at the moment? So spraying certainly would seem to be the biggest opportunity, but that's not something that can be done everywhere, and there's issues of regulation and the economics, but we're going to see more of it. And you can see more of it, because in the second edition of the Grow Age Digital Learning Series will be on drones, and that's coming to you April 10. So put that in your diary, April 10, DLS number 2 on drones, and that's going to be out at Changi Exhibition Centre, excuse me. So look out for that one. Now, And again, so back to sort of looking at these different opportunities around data collection. And this also is a bit of a plug for one of the later editions of this series. Geodata for Agriculture and Water are coming to town, and actually that's in the middle of the year, if I'm not wrong. I think it's around about June. Now they've got a number of projects going, and they will be bringing a selection of these projects to Singapore as part of the digital learning series, and they're covering some really interesting areas that you can see. Golden Paddy, I think many of you are familiar with Golden Paddy, that they're working with the government of the Netherlands and the Space Agency, and again, collecting some great information and great data, but how they sort of turning it into business models. We'll be very interested to see these companies, projects will be coming to Singapore, basically pitching to us all. So again, we'll advise you of that, but I'm sort of particularly interested to see those. Now, and again, there's more, and I guess this is, on one basis we say, listen, we've got to get data, it's hard to get data. Then all of a sudden, there's lots of data, but how do we actually create the right business model to utilise that data? And that's really the sort of the task for us as business people, to keep thinking, how can we utilise this data? It is being used in these instances by corporations looking at yield forecasting, disaster relief. For insurance companies, we've got Swiss Re supporting this, so there's opportunities there. So it's kind of back to data. It's always about the data. And of course, the one that I think we're most probably pretty familiar with is collecting different types of data for the unbanked and the newly banked folks around, and how we can work with them, different sorts of data. It's interesting, this market itself is growing. A number of, we've got two in the current cohort, Crowdy and Cropidal. They're doing some good numbers, but now we're seeing the peer-to-peer crowdfunding coming not into controversy, but because it's getting bigger, governments are taking greater interest, and there's issues of increasing regulation around here. But banks are less so, because banks obviously have done the hard yards in many of these instances, so there's opportunities for the startups to work with the big banks. Now, potential. Okay, so we're zooming down into opportunities and sort of coming back upside to where is it going. Now, these big transaction values are projected, this is Google Tomasics one, 72 to 240. How much of that's going to be in ag tech? Because this is talking about internet economy. But again, it's just showing that we're all going in the right direction. The connectivity is high, but not everybody's got hand phones. And not everybody, if they've got hand phones, we're still seeing in different parts of Southeast Asia relatively low penetration of smartphones. But it changes, it's different in every country and every part of that country. Go across Indonesia and you'll experience different connectivity levels all over the place. And to that end, and I am coming to the end. So, this is me last week with some of the Grow Asia team out in the field. Now, Eddie, guy in the mid-40s, who is absolutely delightful. We had the privilege to sort of spend quite a bit of time with him, interviewing him and his colleagues as they were working their rice. And one of the questions I asked him, I said, so look, this is tough work. Why do you do it? And his answer is, there's no pressure. Obviously, he wasn't speaking to me in English, but he saw this as a relaxing life, a lack of pressure, a lack of hassle. Possibly thinking, I don't want to be doing what you're doing, looking at me. But he was enjoying life. The fact that we were there saying, listen, you could do this, and here's a smartphone, and here's yield forecasting, and here's IoT. And I'm quite happy with my feature phone. He held that up to us. And we knew that, but a part of what the Grow Asia team were doing, and took a number of MNCs and our cohort there, was just to sort of test out some of our assumptions and some of our hypotheses. Of course, there were many using smartphones. Rice, and one of the interactions we had was with a retailer who showed us different Facebook accounts. Facebook for the rice farmers had a small number of members. The Facebook group for tomatoes, I think, was 41,000, and the Facebook group for cloves was 15,000 users. Now, this is just in Indonesia. So, what that says, obviously, higher value crops, people were making more money out of those, and so had the opportunity, were more likely to have smartphones. So, it's all very different. He was looking for a kind of a chilled life. He did use a little bit of Facebook and WhatsApp. That was kind of the idea of actually using a farmer's management app wasn't what he was doing at the moment. It's not that he won't, it's just that it's not part of what he's doing. And so it was interesting to see the adoption levels through Facebook and WhatsApp, how that is driving people to utilize different apps. Because this is him, you know, thrashing his harvest. He did this actually, all of this section there, just while we were talking to him, and about sort of 40 minutes on that day. And so this is the level of sophistication that he's using, quite happily going about it. So I think we have to keep coming back to kind of where we started, that, you know, what are the problems, what are the real problems? And how are people solving them today? What are their workarounds? And as we want to sell more, that's great, but we've got to work out how we can bring them on the journey in a way that they're going to be comfortable and they'll change their behaviour in line with what they can afford and what they're happy with. So, concluding there for the moment, that little sort of wrap up and sort of view of how we're seeing things, we're now going to go into the panel where we'll hear other comments about what farmers need and want. So I'm now going to hand over to Samang. Where are you? You're going to come up and they're going to get you some chairs. And we've got Crowdy, Tunya, and our daughters who are going to come and we'll be good. Thank you. I'll hand you this microphone.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Somang, and I work at Grow Asia. And my actual day job is being a country manager for our Vietnam and Myanmar chapters. So, okay, well, I'm really pleased to invite our panelists, Johannes from Crowdy, Pujat from Tunya, and Jonathan from Adatos. Everyone, please welcome. Okay, so one of the reasons we're here today is that we're launching the Grow Asia Digital Directory, and we thought that it would give you guys a bit of a flavor for us to introduce some of the 3 very, very exciting and very different businesses that are featured on our digital directory. So I guess to start with, maybe you guys can introduce yourselves and your businesses, and specifically what kind of solution did you set out to solve with your digital solution?
Okay, hi everybody, my name is Johannes. I'm the CEO and founder of Crowdy. So Crowdy basically a crowd investing platform for agriculture. So we connect retail investors out there with every retail farmers that need working capital. So we want to bridge between, because right now our farmers cannot get any access to finance. So we want to help to directly connect with any retail investors that interested in agriculture. Thank you.
Okay, well, just before we hand it over, I kind of want to ask a question. So you're a peer-to-peer lending platform. How did you come up with this idea? Because it's never occurred to me as an urban person to think, oh, I have some spare money, maybe I should lend it to a farmer. So how did you kind of do the demand seizing, and how did you see the opportunity for this?
Okay, so as a platform, we have 2 customer sides, right? The first one is farmers, the second one is the crowd or investor itself. So what Crowdy do in Indonesia actually giving them education about how investing in agriculture can improve the whole livelihood of farmers and how livelihood of their self. Because like it's basically like the farmers the one that provide all the foods to the cities or things. So when you improve farmers' life, you can basically improve everyone's life. So yeah, why don't you like put just $1 to invest with farmers, helping them to get better, to can provide you better foods. So that's kind of logic that we want to deliver to this.
Okay, all right, and let's hear from
you. So my name is Hojat, and I work with a company called Tunya. Tunya is a Burmese word which means tilling in the Burmese language, and the idea is that we utilize and leverage the power of mechanization to help smallholder farmers to increase their incomes. So the way we do this is we basically connect farmers to agri-machinery and precision agriculture to help them increase their yields by providing a more affordable, reliable service. We do this by making our drivers go around the fields a bit more slower to increase the threshing ability of the harvest machines. And then the future plan is to, as we start to move with these farmers from a traditional service delivery, we will move them into a digital service delivery, where we're now starting to see our farmers book our service using an app, starting to payment integrated with a local mobile wallet provider, and then this moves slowly into like the digital landscape that we all kind of dream of. Just a bit of context, Myanmar is I think the second most isolated country in the world. Probably many of you guys have been there or are looking to do business there, so it's just sort of opening up. And then this has its own unique sort of lens in terms of how technology can work in terms of adaptation and early adoption for this landscape. So thank you, and it's great to be here.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, I guess well, Adatos is a little different. You are providing more high-end solutions for companies. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm Jonathan. I work for Adatos. We're Singapore-based, and we do remote sensing. Adam made an interesting comment earlier about data, and we're in the data business, and we always say that capturing data is easy. What's hard is analyzing it, what you do with it. And we meet a lot of particularly large scale, so our clients tend to be, think of them as aggregators. So they tend to be plantations, large plantations. They tend to be people in the food industry who are probably buying largely from smallholders. And then we deal with people like fertilizer companies, equipment manufacturers, and all of that sort of ecosystem, if you like. It's about getting the smallholders up to the same level of information that large plantations would have. And we have one very interesting client in the food industry, and he wants to use remote sensing to help the individual farmers to know when there's pest and disease in that particular crop coming towards them. So the way they find out right now is they're all down the pub together, and one says to the other one, hey, I've got, a beetle or cassava mosaic virus or Ganoderma in palm oil, and it's, I'm 5 kilometers away from you. We're automating that using remote sensing for this particular client, and he's doing it, it's very interesting, he's doing it from a sense of community because, he wants to help the smallholders. He's doing it to engender loyalty from them, and at the same time to get a better price. So there's definitely an economic driver, and that I think is one of the key lessons that we've learned, is there has to be somebody who has an economic reason to do something in order to help the smallholders. And we also feel you have to deal with aggregators. So that's, I guess, been our learning in getting into the smallholder game.
Okay, great. So this is jumping ahead a little bit to our breakout, but one of the topics that we wanted to discuss with you all in the room today is really what are the challenges in smallholder value chains, right? Because so often people come up with a sexy buzzword solution for things, and and now that you have a solution, you're going to try and retrofit that to the actual problem. And that was one of the reasons why Grow Asia ran the farmer-centered design workshop in the actual countryside last week, so that we can really see what farmers' lives are really like. How do they think? What do they actually need? And be able to break some assumptions. So, we've listed a few of the challenges that we think are probably like the top challenges from a farmer's perspective, or for smallholder farmers and their value chains. Can everybody see some of these? You may or may not agree with these, but I wanted to ask our panelists if any of these challenges particularly spoke to you, and which ones, I guess, you were trying to resolve with your business?
Okay. So basically, crowding tackling the most one of the fundamental problems for farmers finance. But after we giving them financing, we realized the number one is also the problems involved. Farmers, their lack of knowledge and skill to using those money wisely. So we see skills and also how to prepare them, every farmers to get ready to receive the funds is going to be like another cases. So and how to use it wisely and how to make them fund better is going to be the cases.
Okay, so like financial literacy as well as digital literacy. Okay, just to ask you a follow-up question, how important is it for the farmer to use, like how important is the digital platform itself for your farmer? I imagine it's important for the lender side, but does the farmer actually have to be engaged on your platform, or can you manually just try to link them with the right lender?
The first 2 years we always do manually, because like when they see technology, they always assume that we're using some kind of black magic or something. So they really didn't know about the technology. They didn't know about the internet. So what we must do is actually assume there is technology and internet as a tool to actually help in the matter. So we giving several cases, several people that we improve their lives, so they're starting to consider to using technology. But in our cases, like 20% in our farmers using technology. But starting in the next 6 months, 100% of our farmers using technology, because they're starting to realize that they start need technology. Because like as previous panel said, like sometimes they don't know they need it until they affect the whole benefit. So yeah, that's pretty important for scaling up. But right now we're still combining with the traditional models and digital models.
Yeah, I imagine that while the buzzwords like blockchain are very sexy to investors and people sitting in Singapore, it's not exactly resonating with a farmer in terms of why do I have to upgrade my mobile phone from a feature phone to a smartphone? Why do I have to get a data plan, right? And in this, like with the very slow data, why do I have to download it and why do I have to use this platform? Can't I call my guy and the guy will do everything for me? And I wonder if that's still, quite a lot of the mentality. Yeah, Pooja, do you want to maybe elaborate on how your digital platform is like performing a function in your business to like lending tractors to farmers?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing your observations because we fully agree. When we found our booking app was ready, we would go and show this to the farmers and then run workshops, and we found that the challenge was they needed a lot of hand-holding, let's say in the first year or so, in terms of how to actually use the app, the value of the app, like why should I do this instead of having a face-to-face conversation. And so what we learned from that is that there really has to be a bit of a combination of both. A person or a farmer in these cases want to have a real conversation, and so having a one-on-one conversation with that customer really helps uncover their needs, what they'd like to do, their aspiration, and then the technology maybe becomes one solution of many that it can essentially develop a customer journey with the same customer. So that's sort of, I think, one thing we found. And the other thing also is that, I guess in terms of infrastructure, so when we were onboarding our farmers, we found things like internet connectivities, servers dropping down in and out, actual verification of payment. These kind of things kept on coming up. And so it's, I guess, sort of solvable when you're dealing with a city population. But when you're working with rural people, then sometimes there's a bit of distrust. So it's like, well, I don't see the money, I'm not counting it anymore. How do I know, is this really going to work? Or can it work? Or can you provide me a guarantee? And so these kind of questions we would continue to learn about in terms of how to respond or provide assurances so that the farmer gains trust to kind of use this stuff to kind of make their lives easier. Interesting thing, like what happened when we were doing these trainings is that one of the village women in one of the farms told us that she'd like to actually become a mobile wallet trainer after going through our process. And so we found this interesting because I guess what we're seeing is that although there are challenges, there are, you could say, digital champions that we can find in each village. And so it's also a question of how do you maybe create a network of these digital champions, or maybe young people, or the farmer's son or daughter. And these people themselves are quite happy and willing to train others to use this stuff to make their lives easier. And it's also very practical. Like in Myanmar, for example, at least half the population is unbankable. There are branch banks in many areas. And so a mobile wallet saves a lot of time. You don't have to go on your motorbike to an area. You can do it from your phone. So there's sort of conveniences that can become these sort of drivers as well.
Okay, great. Well, Jonathan, I guess looking at these challenges, which of these was your business aiming to solve, and how are you going about solving them?
Sure. I'd just like to thank Johannes as well for bringing up black magic earlier, because we use satellites. They're 700 kilometers in the air, and they can tell whether that tree opposite us is healthy or has the one next to it has something wrong with it. So we often get the black magic question as well. Particularly when we go and see, typically when we go and see a client, the first thing we do is put up a satellite image of their assets, or perhaps the smallholders that they buy the crop from, and then we show them analysis, and they say, well, how did you get this? Were you guys in Myanmar last week, or Vietnam, or wherever? And we say, no, we've never been there. But people, one of the sayings we have in the company is nobody owns space. So getting the data, and you're all in the agriculture space, but compared to things like fintech, which is very fashionable at the moment, or blockchain, or whatever it is, or medical technology, there you have a lot of issues about getting data. Here we don't have any issues. The plants don't have rights. Probably I've said some people saying that. The plants don't have rights. We can get the imagery. They're publicly available satellites. They cover every inch. As you know, of the surface, probably every day we can get an image over most areas, depending on what kind of information we're trying to get. So we're trying to, it's challenge number 4 really, is getting information to farmers on what's going on in their plot. Is there enough water? Is the crop at the right part of the cycle? Is the nutrition, are they using the right fertilizer, for instance? That's a question we get a lot. And that, as those of you who are in the fertilizer business know, that's a very manual process right now. Even in big, sophisticated plantations, that can take, we've had people tell us they don't even know for 6 months what the NP and K values are in their plantation, because a little man has to go on a motorbike, he has to send it off, then it comes back, and then all the samples get mixed up, and then they go, well, we think in this 30 hectares, perhaps the NPK values are this, but by the time they find it out, it's 6 months, it's too late, it's almost worthless. So using remote sensing, you can get information much more in real time. You can deliver that to farmers, both big and small, as long as you work through an aggregator. I think that's been our key takeaway.
Right. Yeah, I want to probe you a little bit further about, since your business works more directly with agribusinesses, larger producers, and many of us sitting in this room are working with bigger businesses. What role can bigger businesses play in helping scale digital solutions? And any sort of feedback that you have from working with some of the big agribusinesses?
Thanks, Simon. That's a great question. I don't know how many, maybe a show of hands, how many people are in innovation labs here in big corporates? I'd be curious. No need to be shy. They're all in the front row, that's interesting. Or maybe the people in the back row sleep, I don't know. But, so I think, we've interacted with lots and lots of innovation labs, and I think our learning there has been that the innovation labs need to be very close, or the closer they are to the business and the use case, the better for us as a, we've been going 4 years, so I don't know whether we're still a startup, but whatever we are, as a small company interacting with a massive company, there has to be, for us, we don't have the resources of IBM or some other big, wonderful corporation to work on something for a year, which is fun and interesting, and you guys learn about AI and all that stuff. We don't do science projects, as the saying also that we have in the company. So I think being close, knowing what the business case is very specifically, helps us a lot. And then we also find that having a champion, obviously, and the more senior the champion, the better. The guy I talked about earlier, who's in the food business, who wants to help the smallholder farmers figure out where pest and disease is, he's the owner of the company. Okay, so I said, when we were talking about the project, I said, well, how's your agronomist going to respond to this? He said, I'm the boss, I've decided, it's happening. And I'm like, okay, great. That doesn't always work that way in a lot of companies where you get some, resistance to change. I would say we're all in the business of doing things differently. I'm sure the Indonesian banks don't always love you, Johannes showing up. I'm sure the equipment manufacturers don't always love you. And it's the same, we navigate the internal politics in bigger organizations. But I guess, yeah.
Okay, great. Huja, I wanted to ask you, how did you get started? Who was your financier, and what has the growth trajectory been like? Mainly just because I also want to probe you further about what the gaps in the ecosystem might be, because and specifically from Myanmar's perspective or anything from a Southeast Asia perspective that you might want to share.
Yeah, so similar stories. We kind of spun out from a large agri service provider in Myanmar called Proximity Designs, who had done a series of piloting on land leveling projects in Myanmar for about 3 years, and then the gap was that there was a need for a dedicated startup to focus on land leveling and precision agriculture and to onboard more farmers in this kind of technology input. So that's kind of where we started, and our pilots were funded through that. So I guess for our first few years it was a combination of grant funding and convertible notes. Later on, I guess as we grew and we received more traction, I guess people started to take a bit more notice, and after year 1, year 2, we were still alive. We didn't go bankrupt yet, and so that's when I think some of maybe the more regional players came in, and I think a turning point for us was going through the Mekong Business Initiative, and then later on with the Padang Digital ASEAN Initiative with ProAsia and MUFG. Yara, and these two I think opened up a lot of doors in terms of additional piloting to work with larger multinationals in the space, and also to see how our mechanization input could maybe provide a solution or link to their finance product or their fertilizer product or their networking that they were trying to do in the area. So it's kind of been an interesting journey for us to see where we go and how we continue to kind of scale up regionally.
Hey, thank you. And Johannes, you guys were also in the Croatia Digital Accelerator program, right? Okay, so how did you guys get started in terms of funding, and what do you feel as the gaps in the ecosystem to try and enable more companies like you?
So this is our 4th year. Our first and the second year we survived by bootstrapping and also receiving several grant money and also several prize and several competitions. But the major barrier to entry to this industry, especially in Asia, is the cultures. It's really different in every areas, in every cities and every village. It's really different when you want to touch peoples. And one of the scalability issues is we must have human interactions. So that's really hard to actually touching them without any human interaction at all. So we cannot just build a platform and deploy it in the ecosystems. That's bring to our solutions. That's why we using several financial products to actually digitalize all stakeholders that in agriculture right now, starting from the agriculture suppliers, farmers, until the off-takers or the buyers. So we try to engage to the ecosystem that we build, the whole infrastructures, to so everyone can also disrupt the industry. So everyone can build the solution based on the data and infrastructure that we already built.
Okay, great. So it seems like both of you initially started with some grant money, and that was sort of the seed funding that kicked off, your business. And it just leads me to wonder if it's still dependent on grants, because I'm aware that in China there's a lot of like private sector, just like competitive capital out there for ag-tech. Maybe that is one of the gaps in Southeast Asia. That still a lot of great ideas have to start very small, because grant money is typically not, like large sizes. It's about 300,000 or less, much less usually. In Myanmar, significantly smaller, like 50 to 100,000. So. Do you think that there's a role that bigger companies can play in maybe, filling that gap? And more personal question: what would you like? Would you like to be bought over by a big agribusiness and like exit?
I'm always looking to partnership with big company, because like we when we want to touch more and more farmers, we need more and more big company to actually scale our business model and scale our reach. So that's always gonna be our aim. But in terms of like access point or anything, that we're still seeing that partnership is definitely the main priority right now. So how to actually collaborate with every agriculture stakeholder is gonna be like main priority for us.
Yeah, I guess to echo the point, it is a challenge. I think the map that Adam showed a bit earlier, you could see that in terms of ag flow or ag tech deals, like Myanmar was sort of at the end of the class. And so, you think about some of the stories and speeches. You might be familiar with this speech that Lee Kuan Yew gave in Singapore, where he talked about how in the future, Myanmar might overtake Singapore. He was talking about in terms of 30 years ahead from now, and so on, in terms of the backbone of a culture of education and learning that permeates the population. And so, these are things that we can sort of think and anticipate. What does that look like now? And if I was the multinational, I would want to come in at an earlier stage, to capture some of that market share and take advantage and to build a brand loyalty. We've seen that in particular with a lot of the tractor multinationals. So John Deere, Kubota, Mahindra, they're all there together with the fertilizer multinationals. And I guess there's been a bit of a rush to grab in and get market share. But now the repositioning is, how do we move from just selling products or services to actually creating value? So maybe I bought my tractor, but now what else can I do with it? How can it achieve more utilization? And this goes into the acquisition question. So you're probably familiar, there was a recent acquisition in America of Yard Sale by Caterpillar, which was, Yard Sale was like, it's now getting about 120 million in revenues, which is basically an agri-machinery marketplace, like connecting underutilized machinery to people who want to use it. So there is definitely huge scope. So what would that look like if there was a Southeast Asian version of that here? And certainly from our bigger brothers in India, this model has already been proven. So we see it as a potential to become maybe, let's say, the Grab for tractors.
Yeah, Jonathan, any sort of
sounds
comments?
like $5 billion. I don't know about 120 million, but anyway.
Any comments on the ecosystem and what the gaps might be, and what I guess the people in this room, so companies, other digital solutions providers, ecosystem players like GrowAsia could do to fill in those gaps?
So I might just comment quickly on the financing question, because we're a little bit different. We were financed initially at the seed level by Wavemaker, who's a VC, as many of you know. Paul Santos runs it based in Singapore. And then we had SG Innovate, and the Singapore government's come in twice through different entities. And then we had Siam Cement out of Thailand also invest last time. So, our funding has been a little bit different maybe. We've gone less down the sort of grant or competition route than some other people. I think, having a VC as an investor is generally, actually always been very good. They've been excellent, like partner, they've been good advisor, they've made introductions, both to clients and other people who wanted to invest in us or talk to us. So that's been really good, and actually obviously the government is super supportive, and it's almost like, I think we feel it's like a stamp of approval a little bit. People go, oh, you got the government in, so that's good. So having I think the right kind of investors. Recently, we've been turning people down a lot. We've had a lot of inquiries, people wanting to invest. Obviously, agtech is hot, AI is hot. So we've been saying we don't want any money, which is also a good thing, which of course gets people to call you even more. But I think it's Singapore is obviously becoming, or is already, I don't know, becoming the hub for agtech, and I think how it'll be interesting to see how other countries around react to that. So I was talking to a sovereign wealth fund in another unnamed country who'd offered us a tax deal to move to that country, and the sovereign wealth fund said, if I were you, I wouldn't move, which I thought was quite interesting. So, I think we all know the advantages of being in Singapore. There was an article not long ago, some of you may have seen, about Drew, my co-founder who's at the back, and myself, about living in Singapore and why the business is in Singapore, why aren't we in Myanmar or wherever. And I think a lot of those reasons why a lot of us are living in Singapore are the same reason that we have business here at the end of the day, right? And that's a big competitive advantage, certainly I feel, for Singapore in terms of ease of doing business. We know what the rules are, and we know how things work and how to get things done, and that's a big plus.
Okay, well, I would like to maybe give the opportunity to take a couple of questions from the floor. So if you have any questions and you want to address it to a specific panelist or to all of them, are there any questions from the floor? Okay.
Thank you. Johannes, I'm interested in your model. It seems like you're kind of a wallet, an e-wallet, and then trading off on the side. But is the capital, you say it's peer-to-peer, so is the capital coming from individuals? Is it like, I can't think of the name of that one, or is it from banks? So are you going bank to bank and then saying, we'll be your e-wallet to connect to rural?
Okay, maybe I will explain a little bit about how Crowdies actually works. So imagine your Crowdies farmers. So every time we go into rural area, we always make a small community development first. We educate them, usually it's around 20 people. So we prepare them to actually getting loan. So after we prepare them getting loan, and they start asking for a loan, we analyze in our credit scoring models between, like, is it good farmers, is it good crops at the right time, is it on land. And then we post it on a platform. And everyone can invest starting with $1. So we combine individuals' money with banks' money, multi-finance, financial institutions, everyone can invest in the farmers itself. So after it is fully funded, we never disperse cash to the farmers. So we disperse through agriculture suppliers partner. So we partner with agriculture retailer shop. So we disperse money to the agriculture retailer shops. So the farmers only receive fertilizers, seeds, and pesticides. So after the processing, we connect directly to the buyers. Usually it's exporters, foreign markets, wet markets, industry, anyone. So the buyer gonna be paid to Crowdy. So Crowdy gonna be split between the farmer side and the investor side. So that's how it works in Crowdy. So to minimize, because our first year, 70% of our projects getting default because of mismanagement of money. So tons of money when we giving cash, they're using for buying televisions, buying motorcycles or anything. So we prevent those kind of things, and we are the one that actually digitalize every stakeholders and make the infrastructure surround it. Yeah. I hope this answers your questions.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hello. I have a question for Jonathan. we actually share the same name. So. In terms of crops that you're working with, are there any that you're focusing on, or it's more of a spread at the moment? And also, it's one thing I understand to gather data, but how are you managing to analyze it at the moment?
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Great name, by the way. So we've started in a few big crops. Not massively scientifically, to be honest. In fact, we found that we started in kind of oil palm, and we found that's probably the most complicated area to start in, because the damn trees last 25 years, right? So that makes it complicated to start with. But there are a lot of opportunities, because it's obviously a very, very large business. So we've done oil palm, we've done planted forest, eucalyptus, acacia, we've done rice, we're doing some stuff with pineapples, cassava, so reasonable spread of crops. And what we tend to find is there are certain, for those of you who are familiar with remote sensing, there's an index called NDVI that people look at for plant health. We don't really like it. There's a lot of problems with it, so what we tend to find is that we build custom vegetation indices for the particular crops that we're dealing in that give us better results for looking at the health of crops. So yeah, and then we also use synthetic aperture radar, which is another technology away from optical satellites to measure biomass. So for certain crops, particularly for things like eucalyptus, if you want to measure biomass, that's very, much better than going out and sending a whole bunch of guys out into a massive plantation and measuring and doing sampling, which is how they do it now, which has 30 to 40% error rates. So you can measure the actual amount of trees standing in the forest, whether that's natural forest or a planted forest. Did you have another question? Sorry.
So is this satellite?
Yeah, it's generally satellite. We do take drone data from people as well and analyze that. The issue with drones, for those of you who have drone experiences, it's not often, or it's not always machine readable. To get the same level of uniformity of data to be able to read it by machine is much more difficult for drones, because you've got to stitch a lot of small images together. And whilst it may be okay for one of our clients sent a truckload of interns to count palm trees off photographs, we don't do that. We take multispectral, so we'll take, drones take generally 4 bands, red, green, blue, and near infrared. We'll take 12 bands. So it's massive amounts of data. So that was your other question about how do we process the data. So we just did a project that was 60 terabytes of data. 75 million hectares is what we analyzed to find a particular crop, planted it, and then do some analysis. So that's a massive amount of data. Obviously, we do it in the cloud, and we use high-performance computing to do it. And we use deep neural networks to read all that data. So that's the, I think there was a question earlier about competition. And so to do what we do, you need to understand satellites, you need to understand agriculture, and you need to understand AI. So those are 3 kind of slightly unusual skill sets that we have in the company.
Hey, thank you. So these 3 gentlemen, I think Jonathan, you're off soon, but your co-founder will be here. So, you can talk to them later. This is very exciting peer-to-peer lending, machinery rental, and remote sensing. So you can talk to them and after the session. So I think I'm going to hand it back to Adam for our next session.
Okay, please join with me in thanking on our panelists for sitting up there and taking the hard questions. Now, what's going to happen? You can go, Johannes, it's okay. What's going to happen next is we're going to ask you to do a little bit of work. Then we're going to have the launch of the Grow Asia Digital Directory. Don't leave, there's more. And then we're going to go to drinks, snacks, and some networking. So now, for you to stretch your legs, we're moving the boards around. If you see on your name tag, there's a number. So if it's 1, I'll ask you to come over here. If it's 2 to there, 3 to there, 4 to there. And if the numbers, of course, are uneven, we'll ask you to do a bit of self-organisation. We don't want more than, say, 7 or 8 at a group. So let's see how we work out with the numbers. The task is a fairly straightforward task. If I just have your attention for the second, the facilitators will help you, but we're going to ask you to have a discussion. There are 5 quick topics. We don't want you to spend more than about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes per topic. There are some questions here, and we want you to give a rating of how important or the impact of this particular issue. And we don't want you all going to be fence sitters landing on 3, because 3 is no good to anybody. We want to see if you think it's not important, it's only a 1 or a 2. Or, hey, I think we can do something with this if it has an impact, so it's going to be a 4 or a 5. So you're going to have to be a bit quick. There'll be a facilitator on each group. Because why are we doing this? Not just to torture you on a Tuesday afternoon, but we want your feedback, because this will go into and help us shape and craft the future series, the future editions of the series over the next matter of months.